The inside story on the issues that affect you and your community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. I'm Dan Hurley. If a person has a medical problem, there is little hesitation about getting help from a professional. But seeking help when a serious psychotic illness first manifests itself often gets put off. Sometimes that's because it isn't immediately clear what's going on. In addition, there is still a stigma around mental illness. Since the initial psychotic break often manifests itself in the teenage years or 20s, parents often do not know where to turn for help. A new program called FIRST has recently been launched by Greater Cincinnati Behavioral Health Services to provide immediate assistance for those suffering their first psychotic break as well as their families. To discuss this program, I am joined by Dr. Tracey Skale, the Medical Director for Greater Cincinnati Behavioral Health, and Stephanie Henderson, the leader for the new FIRST program. Welcome back, Dr. Skale, to the program. Welcome to Newsmakers.
Thank you.
When we're talking about the conditions that are most important here for the FIRST program, what is it that we're talking about? What kinds of conditions is it that people should seek out this program?
We're looking for people that have schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder, that spectrum, so it's a psychotic disorder. And for this particular program, we're looking for people between the ages of 15 and 40, correct, Stephanie? And first break, so they have to be within the first 18 months of diagnosis of psychosis.
Okay, so first 18 months of diagnosis. So, but if a parent, for example, sees something happening, can they call you, get in touch with you immediately, even before they maybe have an official diagnosis?
Absolutely. Yes. We definitely want folks to call our referral line, and I can help walk through any of those
and
processes.
Get them to the proper professionals who can do the diagnosis and figure out what's going on. I've taken from your brochure some of the conditions and some of the things that people might look for, and if we could bring that up, we have a full screen. And what are some of the things? How might this manifest itself? Because what you say here about schizophrenia and the disorder may seem pretty abstract to people.
Right. Well, this is a great opportunity, and thank you for having us here. Mostly when people hear about schizophrenia, it's in a negative light. And we want to say there's some very positive things, especially with early intervention that FIRST offers. So schizophrenia, first of all, is it's a psychotic disorder. It's a neurobiological illness. It happens to be the organ that's affected is your brain as opposed to your pancreas with diabetes or your heart with cardiovascular disease. So these are true illnesses. 1% of the population has schizophrenia, male and female equal distribution. Men tend to sometimes manifest symptoms a little bit later, typically in late teens, early 20s. And it is hard, you're staying with a parent, because a lot of the symptoms mimic other things, especially if substances are involved. So your teen might become more withdrawn. Again, that's not very diagnostic, is it? That can happen with a lot of things. But more also inattention to things that normally were important, inattention to hygiene. Maybe you might even see people talking to themselves, more peculiar behaviors. And schizophrenia in and of itself has what we call positive symptoms, which are not necessarily good. They're just expressed symptoms. So those are things like disorganization. So schizophrenia disorganized type has worse prognosis overall. Schizophrenia paranoid type, part of that refers to delusional material. So delusions are positive symptoms in that they're expressed. So a delusion is a fixed belief that is not true. In paranoid, you really could be poisoned, you could be followed, but you're not. That's the paranoid delusion. A bizarre delusion is not a judgment, it's out of our cultural norms. So if you really believe that there's a little man living in your ear and sending radio waves to Russia about your thoughts, that's a bizarre delusion. Hallucinations are another positive symptoms. It could be command hallucination telling you you need to jump out the window. It could be commenting on your every move. It could be derogatory, saying you're no good, you're ugly, you're stupid, you're worthless, and imagine how awful that is for someone. And then the negative symptoms are actually trickier in a way, and actually trickier to treat. Those are the withdrawn symptoms. Inattention to hygiene, avolition, people don't feel motivated, and it's not that they're lazy, they just honestly don't have that motivation. Flat affect, not having much facial expression, monotone speech, poverty of content, they don't have much spontaneous speech.
So if a person still at home and living in the household, and they observe something with a child, and they call first, or they contact first, and we'll be giving the numbers and how people can get in touch with you. What is it you can do at that point?
If the person has not received hospitalization or diagnosis at that point, we can have them come in and be diagnosed by one of our diagnosticians, and we can get them in to see our psychiatrist as well within 2 weeks, which is pretty unheard of in the community mental health world.
Which is really amazing, because that early period is this terrible period where you don't know what to do, and sometimes you have to get in line, and you don't even know who to call, but also you can't get the services that you even think you need or hope you need. But
absolutely. And fortunately, we've received this grant that came from SAMHSA that was delivered to OMAS.
What's OMAS?
OMAS is Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, and we were awarded this grant, and we've been partnering with the BEST Center, and that is who has provided all of our training for FIRST. They provide our technical assistance, ongoing collaboration, and the BEST Center is up at Northeastern Ohio Medical University, and BEST Center stands for Best Practices in Schizophrenia Treatment.
Oh, okay. Now, what can be done? I mean, okay, a person, there's that first break, either that person or people around that person feel that they need help, they reach out, but what ultimately can be done in this situation?
Well, this is what's fantastic. So I've been in doing this for 22 years, and my special interest is working with people with schizophrenia. So this is fantastic, because we're going to wrap services around this person very early on. The literature shows that the duration of untreated psychosis, the longer it goes, the worse the prognosis is. So the sooner you can get people feeling well, the better. So we're going to do an evaluation by our clinicians, a psychiatrist. We're going to have case management involved, which is ongoing support, education, counseling, even counseling specific to cognitive behavioral therapy for psychosis. We're going to get the vocational, the job people, and the educational people in, because the goal is, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Stephanie, but we want to keep people well. The longer you're in a sick role, the harder it is to get out. So we're even not going to have people apply for disability for the most part. It depends on the person, because we want to try to keep you in school, keep you in your job, and keep you on that trajectory to a healthy course.
Is part of the treatment for, and I know that this schizophrenia spectrum is pretty broad, and different people can manifest in different ways, but is there drug therapy that can be, is there an intervention here that can be used?
Absolutely. I'll let Dr. Skale speak to that piece, and she is the medical expert, but absolutely, and we have seen thus far with our folks that have gotten on a medication regimen, great improvement in only 2 months. So I'll let you speak to that a little more.
Medications are very important for people with schizophrenia. That's not to say that we don't have some people with schizophrenia that aren't on medication. It's very unique to that particular person, and that is not just specific for FIRST, but for GCB in general. We try to be very careful of what's best for that particular person. Our philosophy, and I'm the medical director there and I see patients all day long, is that we want the least amount of medication possible that's effective for that person. So we probably will introduce a medication early on if the person is interested in that and agreeable to it. We're going to try to have a really streamlined approach. If we can get away with one medication, that's what we're going to do. We're very interested in long-acting injectables, because it might be a once-a-month treatment, and some other options as well.
Am I correct that I think, and talking to the people at AssureX, which is a local company, innovators,
Pharmacogenomics,
that using DNA analysis, and that Greater Cincinnati Behavioral is working with them, that there's a way of determining what might be the best medication, and therefore short circuit what can be a long process of trial and error, which can be a very difficult period of time.
It is. There's pharmacogenomic testing that we can do, which is as easy as a swab to the inside of the cheek. We send it off for analysis. It's not foolproof. It doesn't tell you, oh, absolutely this medication, but it tells you if you're a rapid metabolizer, slow metabolizer, and then maybe this medication might be better for you.
Okay. So even on that front, there is improvement going on. How will you measure success here? What are you looking for? What's your matrix? What's your statistics that you're looking for?
So as far as our outcomes and what we are measuring, not just for our grant purposes, but just to demonstrate that what we're doing is effective and impacting someone's life positively, primarily we're looking at things like, is the person employed or in school? That is a major target that we have because it greatly improves the quality of life and trajectory of someone's life to have meaningful activities. We're also looking at rate of hospitalization. So our goal is to not have the person return to the hospital or have as few relapses as possible. We're also trying to minimize any interaction with the criminal justice system, which can be common, unfortunately, with folks experiencing some of these symptoms. Those are the major pieces.
And how does interaction with the justice system occur? Why does that happen?
Quite often, someone may be acting bizarrely out in the community. They may be wandering. There's a lot of kind of compulsion to be wandering around. So that may be wandering in the street or having bizarre behaviors towards those in the public. And that's how the criminal justice system or the police get involved. Okay.
And then once they're in that system, there's a whole nother set of issues, struggles that you're facing.
Right.
So how long were you thinking about developing FIRST, and what went into your agency's decision to take this initiative? Because I understand it's happening in a few places, but this is still pretty experimental stuff, right?
Right. Well, actually, we were interested in this years ago. Dr. Kane out of New York had been working on this, and we were offered to be in a study for this to see how it worked, but we had the potential of being a control group, and I didn't want that for our people to be a potential control group. We wanted the real thing.
Which meant
they wouldn't necessarily have all these great, cool things happening for them. So we didn't want that, so we waited a little bit, and I'm glad we did, because now our partners up at the Best Center are with us every step of the way, giving great support, and we are able to offer just state-of-the-art, great care for people with schizophrenia, early onset.
Early onset. Is there any, we talked about teens and 20s. Does this ever happen later in life?
It can happen later in life. It absolutely can. We typically do see late teens, early 20s, but definitely can happen in later times. Sometimes people have a genetic predisposition and maybe a stressor sets it off. We don't know the etiology of schizophrenia. It's probably going to be a lot like they think of Parkinson's at this point, that there's probably multiple etiologies for why schizophrenia occurs. Okay. But there are some certain things that we look for in terms of psychotic features. And that besides the positive and negative symptoms, there's also cognitive symptoms. So sometimes problems with executive function and focus can happen. And that's also importance of treating early, because there's some thought that untreated psychosis, you can have decreased intellectual functioning, cognitive impairment. The early name for schizophrenia was dementia praecox, thinking that there was a deterioration of course. We know that in some people with schizophrenia, when you do serial MRIs of the brain, you see increased size of the lateral ventricles, decreased size of the frontal, parietal, and temporal lobes, and anybody can see that you want more of the good stuff and less, less.
And of course, fortunately, I understood all of that. Yeah. So.
Well, you don't want more space in your brain. You want
right.
So, yeah.
Stephanie, what do you, when people come to you, whether it's the patient or their families or their friends or whatever, what state are they in?
A lot of them are afraid. A lot of them don't believe that they have a mental illness. That is one of the markers, I would say, of people experiencing a first break, and it can continue up throughout their lifetime, really. So the families are quite often concerned, but fortunately we have had a lot of family support, which again is another great indicator of people's future success and healing and recovery. So what we focus on, not so much is the person receiving the services that they have to quote-unquote admit that they have this diagnosis, because again, you can explain that a little more if you'd like to, but that's part of the nature of having psychosis, is not believing that. They're not in denial, it's a perceptual issue. So we focus on how has your life been negatively impacted by some of the symptoms. So instead it's, wouldn't you like to get back in school, or whatever it is that's individual's goal. And so we help support them in reaching those goals, and kind of through that process, and we get to start imparting information and really asking about their symptoms and how we can remove some of those, or make them not as stressful to them.
How are these services paid for? If somebody comes to you, is this covered in insurance? How is this covered?
Well, the grant helps us a lot, and we have people that have Medicaid and all that. The grant also helps people that would have been over income maybe for our services, and they now can also get everything that we have to offer in terms of counseling and wraparound. So that's a nice equalizer. So we are partnering with our colleagues at the Linder Center of Hope, Children's Hospital, all the neighboring hospitals for this. Psychoeducation is really key, education for the particular patient and the family. And the more the family understands, the better it is for everyone.
Yeah.
Yes.
And am I correct, with the Affordable Care Act, there is more of an acceptance that mental illness is truly an illness that needs to be covered, just as whatever physical illness is? I mean, there is a broadening understanding of what should be in our health care plans. Is that correct?
I hope that's the case.
Yes.
And the more public awareness and shows like this, thank you, Dan, that show that these are real neurobiological illness, the better it will be.
Okay. Well, let's make sure people know how to get in touch with you.
Excellent.
And if you want to find out more about the FIRST program, you can go to the website, which is www.gcbhs.com. And to call the FIRST program directly, it's 513-354-7337, or the general number for Greater Cincinnati Behavioral is 513-354-5200. Thank you both for being here this morning, and thank you for the work you're doing. It's absolutely essential.
Thank
you so much.
Stay tuned. After the break, a new effort to address panhandling in Cincinnati. Whether it's on the corner of 4th and Vine or at an exit from the interstate, it seems that the number of people panhandling has significantly increased. This week, Downtown Cincinnati Inc. and the Cincinnati Police announced a new initiative to address panhandling. Welcome back. The new educational initiative is called Give Responsibly. It is a public awareness campaign to deter panhandling in favor of supporting social service providers. To talk about the program, I am joined by David Ginsburg, the president and CEO of Downtown Cincinnati Inc., a business organization committed to making the downtown lively, safe, and clean, and Colonel James Whalen, an assistant police chief with the Cincinnati Police Department. I think in both cases, welcome back to Newsmakers. I don't know, have you ever been on before?
I've not been on Newsmakers.
Really?
Nope.
I don't know how that
And
happened.
I'm offended.
I don't know how that
Great
happened.
to be here. Thanks.
Yes,
Thank you, Dan.
well, welcome back. First off, is there a reason that this initiative is being taken at this moment?
Yeah, as we're going through the winter season, getting ready for spring and the All-Star game and all the excitement that's going to be primarily downtown, we want to make sure that people understand, number one, that not every person that panhandles is a homeless person, not every homeless person panhandles, but we really want to have two goods. Number one, we'd like to see less panhandling downtown because that's a concern for many visitors to downtown. But we also want to be sensitive to the needs of folks, and by directing them into social services, they hopefully will get off the streets and won't be panhandling, but they'll also have something being done for them that's good and will take them off the streets long term and better their lives.
Colonel Whalen, what's your view about why people end up panhandling?
You have to look at the path that panhandling finds people or puts people on. If you have a legitimate need, somebody who's hungry and you're providing food for a meal, that's a generous human act, but look at the path that leads a person on when there are social services available that can feed that person, no one's going to starve, and provide a better way other than the random generosity of strangers for your next meal. We also encounter panhandlers that are quite frankly entrepreneurs, and they panhandle for whatever period of time, and then we've seen them get in their cars, go to their homes, and have other streams of income, and it's simply a ruse. It's a role that they play. Finally, we've had some experience of panhandlers that will use panhandling as an excuse to get into your personal space, and then other offenses can occur. So even the best of scenarios here, a hungry person and you're helping them out, there's just a better way to do it, and we wholly endorse the DCI's initiative here.
Well, I stopped yesterday and talked to somebody selling Street Vibes, and wanted to know sort of from his perspective. He sells Street Vibes almost every day on the corner near my office, and I wanted to talk to him. And his view was the number of people panhandling has gone up recently. Yeah. Is that your sense?
Well, we love the Street Vibes folks. They're on the streets. We know many of them, and they're providing a product that's great. Yeah, I think it goes up and down, but I think we have noticed an increase in recent times. But we have a social service outreach coordinator who's out on the streets
for DCI.
For DCI, and he connects with folks, whether they're panhandling or homeless or have other issues, tries to find out what their issues are, build relationships with them, and connect them to the proper social services. And it's interesting, his caseload goes up and down, and I think, again, you get cold weather, the winter, it probably is up a little bit.
Okay, it's up a little bit. Let's be clear, panhandling is not illegal under certain conditions. There are laws that control panhandling and where it can occur even. And so the police could act if somebody is panhandling, and I printed this out, close to an ATM machine.
Right. The city has a specific ordinance that bans panhandling in any aggressive fashion. Someone is allowed to ask once, and then if a person declines, they're not allowed to chase you down the street. Getting out of your car, walking up to an ATM, parking meters, crosswalks, things like that. You also have some traffic laws that are involved. The folks that are standing in the middle of the street, even on a median, are technically in the right of way. We actually had a fatality earlier this year, or last year, I'm sorry, where a person who normally panhandles at an intersection was struck and killed by a car. So there's some danger that's involved in that, and that conduct is illegal.
So was that sort of at on a busy street or at the end of an exit or something? That's the ones that I really...
It was a busy street that leads to an on-ramp. Mm-hmm. And it was a tragic situation, and that's a risk that you take when you stand in the middle of the street or next to an on-ramp or off-ramp for a long period of time.
David, you and I both work downtown. I go up and down Vine Street, 4th and 5th Street all the time, and I give to United Way and to a lot of these organizations that you're encouraging people to give to. And I have to tell you that sometimes I got a pocket full of change and I just want to give, and I put it in somebody's cup. Sure. What do you think about that?
This is guidance. We're a very generous city. Bless your heart, you do give money to United Way and other social services, and we work very closely with Strategies to End Homelessness. If people want to give money to a panhandler, that's certainly their right to do. We just want to make sure that people understand that there's a better way, that very often when you give money to the panhandler, that money may be used to perpetuate whatever problem the person had in the first place, whereas if you give it to the social services, they'll provide services that will help that person long term. So it's encouragement, guidance, and I would also, to those who work downtown, visit downtown, when you give money to panhandlers, you're encouraging more panhandling. It's lucrative to be there. So if we want to reduce panhandling, there's 3 things we can do. Just help to reduce the revenues by not giving money to the panhandlers. That's a great thing to do. We can use social service outreach, connect people to services that will really help them. And then, of course, the third and least preferable, and only in the case of something illegal, do we go to enforcement. So the other 2 are certainly much more cost-effective and helpful things to do.
Okay. How often does someone call the police and say, I'm being aggressively panhandled? And I'm aware that I'm a man. I think women are more vulnerable to this sort of thing. How common is that?
We get some calls for service virtually every day, and some of those calls actually go to David's ambassadors through DCI as well.
And we're going to mention how to call those people. Okay.
Oftentimes it's not so much a citizen who, such as a robbery victim, who stands still and says, bring the police to me, I've been offended. But it's people that'll say, hey, when I was going by such and such a corner, this happened to me and I don't think it should happen, but I'm not staying there to talk to the officer. So a lot of times we sort of clean up after the fact as well.
Okay. And so this is educational, this is encouraging people to give to other agencies, all that sort of thing. Right. And what would be your ideal here? What would be your hope? Say, by the time the All-Star game is here this summer.
We would certainly like to see less panhandling, especially aggressive panhandling on our streets. We have a number here of our hotline, 623-3429. One of the things with panhandlers is if something happens to you, if you're, for example, downtown and you have something at lunch and then after lunch you go up and call the police or call us, it's way too late. This is all about, he's there now, got my cell phone, let me get somebody right out here. Usually if you get an ambassador, the ambassador can either move the person along, make the connection with the social service outreach coordinator, make the connection with the police if possible. So what I'd really like to see is people know more about this and quick response.
Okay, I want to make sure people know how to get in touch with you. For more information about the Give Responsibly program, you can go to Downtown Cincinnati Inc.'s website, www.downtowncincinnati.com. You could also call the Downtown Ambassadors, which runs out of DCI, at 623-3429. And, of course, you can call the Cincinnati Police at 765-1212, or if you feel in danger, 911. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Join us again next Sunday. Have a good week.